time grief we go. Gotta learn to let it go. Once asleep, now awake, feeling every breath you take.
Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long, where we talk about living consciously and helping people uncover their essential selves so that they can stop sleepwalking through life. Our goal is to create a safe space where our guests can share how they've decided to wake the F up and become mindfulness experts through their own emotional healing journey. Welcome to Wake the F Up podcast. I am your host, Alix Long, along with my husband and co-host, David Long. And we're so excited to enter into June and be here in what we're calling Man Month. With Father's Day approaching around the corner and our last month being highlighted on mothering and motherhood and the mother wound, we are going to take an opposite approach. And this is actually quite a passionate project for me to speak about masculinity, emotional masculinity, and the divine masculine. So that space where men get to be men, and maybe we get to also untangle the systems that have been set up. David has a cold, so bear with us as we cough through this entire episode. But men being men and men also being allowed to feel. I think systems are not set up for those two to be actually in the same realm very often. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and it's all about. I think men are fairly practical about their emotions, and that if it's not adaptive or doesn't appear to be adapted to be emotional, we just won't. And I think that's a little bit different in that I think women are more adaptive, frankly, um, or more not more adaptive, but more honest about their emotions and more willing to create a space where they can feel what they were already going to feel. Whereas men are more like, well, this is not a good place to share my emotions, so I'm not. But unfortunately, that's a lot of places, most places, really, for men. I think it's very rare. I think in my life, at least, to have a place where it's adaptive and it's accepted
Mm-hmm.
to share and to feel
With other men, you mean?
and women.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I think women are the primary driver of the men not feeling.
Tell me more.
I think a lot of women want that part of the masculinity that is silent, strong, providing, um, not needing, right? Because it's hard to need and provide in the same, or it can be challenging to need and provide in the same kind of setting.
What do you think women who feel that way, who are afraid for men to really get vulnerable and feel, what do you feel that their inner voice is telling them? Why do you think they want men?
I'm sure it's the same as us, is that they're scared that men don't actually love them or won't love them.
Right. It's so interesting as I've been really enjoying this process of the growth in this company. We've had a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, we're swelling. We're 25 weeks today. So we're moving along with baby. We've got kids graduating and a lot going on in our house this summer. But I've been working with Brand Builders Group, this amazing company. They're very famous. And I've been niching down a little bit because emotional topics are incredibly hard to say, like, what exactly does Wake specialize in? And interestingly enough, I realized like our grief is what has made us wake up. Our grief is what we have recovered from. I wouldn't say we've recovered from grief itself because that doesn't go away, but we have recovered from this problem that you're talking about, which is um, fear. The deeper root is fear. That's the cause of a lot of the problems underneath loss. And the deeper meaning behind that is that I think in all of the loss or in all of the problems that we're talking about on this show, we're actually talking about a fear of not being able to be loved. So the solution in this branding group is like helping me come up with like articulating in one word answers, like what is the solution then? And oddly enough, I find that the solution to a lack of self-love is actually awareness, so that you're able to know yourself and then therefore, when you have awareness, when you're awake enough to pay attention to yourself, you can verbalize, you can have choice, you can tell those you love what you need. And I think men especially are meant, or are not meant, men are encouraged, or it's assumed really, especially by women, that men are confident,
Mhm.
that men are assured, that men are strong.
Mhm.
Strong is a weird word because I've learned that in the death walk, and so this is exactly why like the brand builders group has gotten my mind like blown, is because it is blown. My mind is blown because what I'm saying is that actually grief highlights every problem everyone has, and loss is universal. We can have the loss of masculinity in situations where people suppress you. We can have the loss of our spouses, as is the walk that we have faced in our home. But loss in general teaches us that when something shatters to that level of significant loss, or like full life loss, like losing your spouse, you are living in fear. But in fact, like that was your deepest fear potentially. Like that was probably the worst pictured thing in your mind, was to lose your life, your family, and everyone, a person you love that deeply. And the life that you know is completely gone. And so when that happens, fear no longer has a grip on you. Like you actually have to physically put one foot in front of the other and keep going with fear on the inside. So um in this company, Wake, we're really trying to teach people how to love themselves enough to be aware of what they need and what they're feeling on the inside, despite the world's presses on you. So, masculinity is in question, I think, in lots of ways right now, because women are tired of toxic masculinity. I know for sure I am, especially in the workplace where we are over it. We are too tired. I also personally am really tired of like, I read this week and I thought, like, man, this really landed in my nervous system, that the world is over girl boss. Because it's like, it almost feels like that's toxic too, where you're like, I'm just trying to do all these male things. And I'm like, that's not how we boss. We don't boss as females in a way that men do.
Yeah, that's not just a female thing
I don't
either.
think men
Yeah,
can
no,
hold that up
no,
either.
it's not just a female thing. I think that a lot of employees, men and women, do not like that situation. It's not healthy and it's
Well, doing
destructive.
everything all the time, overworking, hustle culture,
Mhm.
not a balance in your life. Like, we've had some situations come up with the baby, and certain things that are going on in our world, where we're supposed to go on this amazing opportunity at his 1 year office. He's taking his entire staff on a trip. My medical team is not thrilled about me traveling abroad right now, and so we had this decision where he had this huge trip, okay, like where he's taking his entire staff. And I was like, you should go. And it's such an interesting, because this is definitely a masculine feminine thing. The reason that the medical team doesn't want us to go is just, obviously a lot of risks, and hospitals of unknown nature, and lots of things like that, right? Being a little further along when the trip is coming up. Um, he is deciding whether to go or not to go. And I feel like it is kind of a masculine feminine relationship decision that's popped up. And fear is the driving force, right? The reason that we don't want to go is there's not a lot of stability in that. There's a lot of unknowns. We would have to make a choice through fear. Would our outcomes be more or less safe, or are the outcomes better than the problems that could happen, right? Like, would going be better than not going? I don't know. It's an interesting thought, because I feel like to go is the masculine choice. To not go would be kind of a questionable decision by a
Um,
lot of people. Would you say that?
for you to go,
For you to go.
for me to go.
So I cannot go.
Okay, so right. So what we're saying
So
is
what we're saying is I
you
cannot
can't go.
go.
So the
The
question
doctor has
is,
to highly recommend that. She was like, you can, but it would be highly against
yeah,
everyone's choice. So then I was like, you should go. And he was like, I don't really want to go if you can't go, because I don't want to be worried if something was to happen and I'll be so far away.
mhm.
But then I was like, you should go because your team is expecting you. You are the boss. You are the leader. Like, that's a hard decision to make. And I support either decision you make.
Yeah.
But the masculine choice in this, which while we're talking about masculinity, would be what for you? I mean, what do you think?
It could be either actually.
Okay, talk to me
I
through it.
mean, to stay kind of a protective decision, um, with the idea that if there was a problem, I could maybe help or I could support you with the problem, um, which I definitely just intrinsically feel is my role. I don't have to think about that; it just happens. On the other hand, if I went, that would be a tremendous statement of trust in you, and it would be kind of fulfilling my role as the team leader, if you will, as
Mhm.
the owner of the practice. Because when you have employees, it's not a family providing, but it's still a providing situation, right? I mean, particularly in my situation where I don't have any partners or anything, it's just me. My production uh, literally puts food on their table. And that's a bit of a responsibility, and I don't take it lightly. But for me, always my whole life, if I would choose between my career and my family, that was always a no brainer. It was always my family came first. Um, yeah, now I might have abandoned my family outside of work, but I never chose work over my family.
I do think that's a very unique thing about you. Um, I think I think Carl chose work over family, but I think because he was super passionate about his work, got a lot of validity there. He got a lot of validity at home too, but I think that he knew that he was building for us. So it was like
Yeah,
this,
well, that's the justification.
yeah.
That's a common justification that I'm going to stay at work another hour because that's the best thing long term for my family, and I think that is patently untrue. It's
Yeah,
just
agree.
untrue. I think that the hour that you spend, the extra hour, the extra 2 hours, the extra weekend you spend working is more of a negative than the weekend you spent with your family. That's my opinion. Or to quote my nurse practitioner who told me one time, I think my initial podcast, we were debating last year because again, I'm a new business owner. I don't really know. I'm kind of feeling out how to do some things, and one of them was, are we going to work the Friday after Thanksgiving?
Friday. Oh yeah, after.
So after that, and I was looking at the books, going, I really could use you know the extra income. I hate to do another day of zero revenue. Um, and she's like, look, you know, the only people that are going to remember that you weren't there the day after Thanksgiving is your family. And it really made, when she said that, I was like, you're right. I mean, I think about it's not to say that the patients don't appreciate your time,
Sure.
but that's a positive that's this much. The negative impact on your family can really be dramatic by just not being there. Um,
Do you think masculinity, a lot of it is being there? Or do you think that that
from a family point of view, yeah,
mhm.
100%.
And what is being
100%.
there?
Yeah, I think the absent father is a very 1950s, 1960s thing that we've learned is just not a great fucking idea.
Okay, so today I wanted to kind of, and this is going to lead us into some good questions because we've got a list of questions that came from the listeners. We have a list of questions that came from the listeners, and
This is called business. So in acting, which we're not acting, but this is called business. Smoke a cigarette right now. Take a sip of your water.
Andrew, I'm just trying to make pauses where these very loud
Actually, so adding,
choices he
hold
makes
on.
are.
So script writers add business to the script because it's subconsciously more natural.
Not acting. This is not an acting.
I'm just saying viewers will subconsciously think when you take a sip in the middle of a speech or whatever.
I had to listen
Like I
to
just
one
did.
unedited version of this, and it's so bad. You don't even know. It's like coughing, breathing. We sounded like we were
I
Darth Vader.
apologize for the coughing today, and you're not gonna be able to edit it all. I do have bronchitis. I feel fine, but I'm still coughing up some junk.
Okay, I'm gonna pick up where
It's
I
just the way it is.
already said and left off. These should make some nice takes for what are those called, bloopers.
Yeah.
Okay, so
It is what it is.
okay, so I'm gonna pick up where you left off, and today we have a really interesting podcast. I wanted a Q&A. We've gotten a ton of actual questions over time coming in for David that we've been kind of summating and putting into a list. And our staff also, like at last minute, was like, "Oh," like lots of questions. Everybody was really curious about what your thoughts were. If you've been
So
a listener of our show for a
just to cut you
while,
off, my thoughts on masculinity are continually evolving.
Perfect.
particularly
That's
while we work with
Dion.
Dion. I'm
Well, we
becoming
will
more.
link Dion in our
Yeah.
show notes today. So we have been
I'm
seeing
becoming more aware of the conflict between um
the guilt.
right, to just so like the so sometimes you have this feeling, like I had this feeling a lot in my first marriage, that I am the provider that is expected, and then there's this kind of subtext that's not written, that if you ever don't provide, then you're out, and that's a pressure that I feel. So I would
All
often,
the time.
yeah. So I
Have you
would,
felt that before you got married?
no,
So just when you start when you're in partnership and start
yeah,
a partnership.
yeah,
Did you
and
feel that in a relationship prior to marriage?
that if I didn't provide, that they wouldn't love me.
Mm-hmm.
No, because when you're in college, you're dating, and there's no
Okay, so when you're on your parents' money or whatever, like you're
right,
not quite fully on your own.
right,
This is more of a partnership feeling.
right. And so you can respond to that a couple of ways. Either you can kind of ramp up your providing security blanket, or you can say "fuck you." I mean, those are the two.
How would you say fuck you?
Just so take care of yourself. Do your own shit.
Okay.
I actually interestingly did a combination of that. I would oscillate between anger, where I'd be like, "Take care of your own shit. I'm not paying for that," type thing, and then
Resentment,
yeah, and then
anger,
over providing. Um,
out of fear.
yeah,
What were you afraid of?
that she would leave me.
If you didn't provide enough
Yeah,
stability?
yeah,
Is it stability or money?
it's both.
What's the difference between stability and money
Not
for men?
much. Not much.
Do you equate money to be stability?
Yeah, pretty much.
But do you think women think that?
Some do, for sure.
Uh-huh. So for me, it's stability is very different than money.
Yeah,
There's definitely like enough to pay your bills and stay safe. But stability for me, actually, I have a hard wiring to have emotional connection as a part of that, which is, I don't know that all women feel that. I think they do. I think they deeply do. And I think the loneliness gap that we feel, which is exactly what I was talking about earlier, is like what I'm niching down in the company is to understand that we all, but especially like I would say as a female, I think it's even stronger, is we have this gap that's like we feel unlovable or fear of, and I guess what I'm learning and have been learning with Dion and all these therapies we do together, men feel this actually, I think, double time what women feel. They just don't share it.
right.
I don't even know if you know how to process
Yeah,
it.
that's what I'm saying. I'm just learning to kind of process that. Number one, being the provider, um, you can embrace that without the resentment and the um
Well, how do you not have resentment if you is it communication
yeah,
that,
yeah, 100%.
so again,
But
being aware of what you
but
feel.
right, but honestly, when I tried to communicate that, but my prior relationships, ship, um, it was pretty clear that that was in fact the case. So that was a problem. Was that I would feel out, hey, it's the only reason we're doing this because I can pay the mortgage and I can buy you a new car and whatever. And
Doing,
sometimes
what does doing this mean?
working your ass off, taking call all the time,
Got it. Okay.
killing yourself to save some
But not
money.
marriage. The only reason we're in this marriage.
Yeah, that was the question. Like,
That was your fear.
yeah. And then every once in a while I would feel out for that, and I don't think that she. And in her defense, I didn't come out and say it. I should have.
You weren't direct.
Right. I should have just said it.
Were you asking direct questions at all, or were you really beating around the bush?
Totally beating around the bush, which is a
Okay.
common, like, making a joke, trying to get a response.
So for
When
the
the truth
listeners, do
is,
you
you're
think
really
when
trying
men
to.
are beating around the bush, we should sit down and have a direct conversation?
100%.
Are they ready for a direct conversation? Is the reason they're beating around the bush because they're not ready? I mean, this is the hard part where it's like, how much do you
So
pull
this,
out of someone?
yeah. So this goes back to the foundations of the relationship. If you don't have that foundation, no, I mean, then that conversation can't happen.
But had
If you
Betsy
have
have said to you,
if you've
like,
built a
hey, are you afraid I only love you for stability and money?
right, that would have been nice.
What would you have said? Yeah, that's how I feel.
I would have probably admitted, I was like, yeah, I do have feel that way, you know.
So sometimes
But
what you're saying is
unfortunately,
men need women
but
to.
unfortunately, when I did feel that way, I would feel her out for that, and she would unfortunately give me the negative response, which was like, I think she told me one time, "Well, it doesn't hurt," which I just heard, yeah, I was right.
So fear on fear. She was afraid, you were afraid.
Yeah.
But if she was to have, do you think men need women to open the door for emotional conversation?
Absolutely.
Because you're not going to
The
start it
people
without.
that look down on validation and affirmation are just idiots. Everybody needs that.
That's true.
Everybody needs that. It is fucking universal. You need a safe person, not your parent, not your dad. You need a safe person to tell you it's a tell me how you're feeling.
Right.
And
It's okay that
and
you're feeling this
right,
way.
and I'm not gonna hate
And
you.
you're not crazy.
Right.
And you're still lovable, and even in the
But without that conversation, you're doing what I did, which was I think about that sign Exile, that song.
Mhm.
Never heard the song. It's a great song. And he says, like, there's a refrain where it's a duet. Taylor Swift and
Bon Iver.
Bon Iver. It's a duet where they're talking. They're breaking up. They're broken up. Right, and the song is about their
That's actually one of her better songs.
yeah
Taylor
their
Swift.
post breakup situation, and they're kind of talking about why they broke up and why this what seemed like a great relationship didn't last. And he says, um, "I never saw you gave me no signs." And then she immediately refrains, you missed all the signs." And then he says, "I never had any signs." Like they go, in other words, yeah, I mean, you can't read each other's fucking mind. So in her mind, she was telling him, "Hey, I'm not happy." In his mind, she never said she was unhappy. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, if it's unspoken, that's just a huge fucking mistake. And then that kind of builds on it. If you have a unspoken agreement, that's a miscommunication, then that just builds because you think, well, like that situation where I felt Betsy out. Hey, really, what only thing you love about me is the fact that I can make a lot of money or provide you with a beautiful home. And then she would see like, well, it doesn't hurt. And so that miscommunication led me to think that's really the only reason that she's with me. So, and I really like her and I wanted her to love me. So I better not fuck that up part. So then that you add
Mhm.
another little chink in there, and then you don't go back and revisit that because you've already in your mind established that that's really the only reason she's with you. And so you ramp up the stress and the resentment for the providing.
And this is
It's
the
a
way.
pyramid, like a pyramid.
This is the story in the man brain.
Exactly.
Truthfully, this is the story in the women's brain. We're not that
No,
different.
we're not.
We're really not, because women do the same thing. Because she, at the same time,
I actually think about
simultaneously.
that every time you share your anxieties with me. I often think, "Fuck, I
Mhm.
or when or even more importantly, your desires. When you share your desires, like what you want out of a family or a Sunday brunch or whatever it is in your mind, like fuck, I want that. That is exactly what I want as well." Um,
Well, because she's not alive to defend herself, I feel semi-obligated as a female to defend her, or not defend her, but just like speak the female mind. I guarantee in her mind she had all sorts of stories, like
sure,
wonder why, like he's only with me because of whatever
because I'm beautiful.
XYZ. Right.
I think that's a common one. Is women feel like if I don't weigh 115 pounds or less, then he's not going to find me attractive. Doesn't find me attractive, he's going to go. I think that's a common thing, and actually,
And our home looked pretty and have everything.
right, and
looking
that's
great.
actually. I'm not saying that that's not out there. I'm sure that is out there. For me, it's not. It's not a thing. Um, that's not the connection. It's just not the connection.
Generally it's sex. For
Sex,
most men.
sex has a lot to do with
Intimacy.
it.
Do
But
you think that men are able, so like I'm starting to wonder if masculinity, because of the substrates that men are put in these boxes that we, maybe even as women, we put, I know we do, we put you in, the providership role, because I had to do it as a single mom, is incredibly stressful. That's a
yeah,
big
and
pressure
I
cooker.
feel the same way with the motherly role, which I did for a long time, and particularly after she did, I did all the motherly role. It's
It's hard to do.
I mean,
And it's against our nature.
it's
Not
unbelievably
unobtainable, by the way, for my single people out there. But I think, Dion, this is the shaman therapist that we work with. She often will say that, we were raised in communities and we were meant to be in tribes, and that's the way that we evolved. And the way the world has gone now in this Western society, it's different. Like, so we would place lots of people in parental roles. So it's like, and I think that's true. As a single mom, I had to
Yeah.
find a lot of different roles to
Oh,
fulfill.
I think that's a universal widow thing in
Mhm.
almost all cultures is they have a if not a written or spoken rule or word about it, it just happens. You know, your parents and your uncles and your family friends kind of come in and fill each. Not one of them fills the whole role, but each one of them helps a little bit of the role.
Well, this is a wonderful segue because I wanted to get to some of the 2024 most searchable topics for men.
Other than sex.
I did actually do this research on the emotional topics that men are searching. I think I definitely did just the most searchable topics for men, which is 100% sex. Sex, lingerie, cars, um, a lot of like motorsports, technology, yeah, like adrenaline seeking things, which have gotten kind of a bad rep.
Not just adrenaline things, but another there's another common thing that all those things have, and they're logical. Men are very generally logical.
Hmm.
We tend to think linearly and
Hmm.
not hermeneutically, if you will. Uh, and like the way an engine runs is very, very logical. There's basic rules. You follow the rules. They do this. That's a very masculine trait. Very masculine mind way the masculine mind works.
Okay. I think it's important when we're talking about emotions. It's very very interesting because you can feel it in emotional work in pop psychology, in the field that we are in with this company. We're researching and educating all the time, and men are exhausted with the boxes people are putting them in. And I think the Me Too movement absolutely needed. There's always facets and movements I think that are people fucking being exhausted with toxic cultures that are not working anymore. And so, a supporter of keeping our workplace free from being sexually driven. Um, then again, the world is sexually driven, so it's hard sometimes. Like work is a subset of life, and so it's been interesting to kind of think about how that movement really did powerfully put some fear into men.
Yeah. So this is a perfect example of where the subtleties really matter. You know,
Hmm.
like the masculine drive, innate drive to provide is healthy, useful, desired, blah, blah, blah. The masculine drive to dominate, which is just a very subtle difference between providing, right? And I think a lot of people cross that line.
Hmm.
Is that's where you get flipped into really, toxicity and unhealthiness and all that stuff. For whatever reason, I've never really felt that drive, honestly, to dominate. I've always wanted to let people have as much freedom as they possibly can, including my spouse and my kids and all that kind of stuff. But for some reason, a lot of men can't be providers without being dominant.
Do you think that's a learned? So this is a question
I
that
don't
came
know.
up. Do you think that
Cultural.
who did you learn your masculinity from?
Well, you don't learn a lot of it, and some of it just happens.
So society gave it to you? It's under,
No,
is
no.
it subconscious?
I mean, I think some of it is hormonal and genetic and that kind of thing.
But if you were to
And
say
then
who taught you to be a man?
my dad
Hmm.
for sure.
But masculinity is different than learning to be a man.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
explain that for the listeners? Because I'm
I think
actually.
about masculinity as kind of the innate subconscious drives of the man,
Mhm. And what do you think defines masculinity for you?
like what makes it.
Yeah, like what do you think those innate drives for you are?
Well, the things we talked about, to be strong, to provide, to be logical, um, to be pragmatic. That's important. Um, yeah, those are the main ones. To be sexual,
I was
for
like, does
sure.
sexuality
Yeah, for
drive a
sure.
man or both men and women?
I think sexuality drives makes the world go round, frankly.
I think I think women just have been shamed for so long because of toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
Um,
I think masculine dominance is a problem and has been a problem for a long time.
Hmm.
And when I say a long time, I mean
Forever.
thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years. And I think we're just scratching the surface of just how deeply ingrained masculine dominance really is.
Yeah.
And I think it will stay ingrained in it'll always be present in certain parts of society. Uh, would be nice for those to be marginalized and not centralized.
Hmm.
Um, and I think there are several different places we could lay that blame on. And frankly, I know this will be maybe unpopular, but religion is definitely a big part of it. No doubt. Only because religion has persisted from a time when masculine dominance may or may not have been adaptive, probably more adaptive than it is today. And they, for whatever reason, want to continue that tradition. It's no longer a useful tradition in certain segments. In some segments, it is adaptive, and it will continue in those segments. But I would like to see masculine dominance, and I think to a large degree, it has. I mean, it's significantly different in my lifetime. It's certainly different than in my dad's lifetime.
Yeah, that was one of the big questions was, did you think masculinity in our children's generation, so versus your dad's generation, has significantly shifted?
For sure.
In what ways?
I think that overarching masculine dominance is not as adaptive as it was.
Do you think that men are having more spaces to feel and be more aware and more mindful?
Yes. Yeah.
And actually, do you think
And I think that's in no short part by the work that women have done, frankly.
so women in the workplace, you think, has that impacted?
Women in the workplace, women voting, women rights, all that stuff has forced men that have been reluctant to see it that women are in fact equal and in a lot of ways superior to men. And in a lot of ways, men are superior to women. We're just different. Is probably the best way to put it.
Different strengths.
Do I think masculinity is going to die? No, that's ridiculous. That's like saying, are we going to have no toes eventually? No, I mean, it's not going anywhere. It's intrinsic.
Right.
It's part
Where
of your,
there's men, there's masculinity.
yeah, it's part of your buildup. Unless we did away with men, and even then, there'll be some women that are masculine.
Right.
And that's okay.
Well, that would be quite a suffrage for growing our population and survival.
So I actually think that the women's movement has really helped men a lot. A lot.
That's what I was saying about the Me Too. It's like, I actually think that opened the doors for women to speak their truth, and men were afraid for the first time that, wait, I don't really want to be associated with that.
And I would love to see men do what I think. So we've talked to some men that have done it, that are like, well, wait a minute. I want to do yoga too.
Right. Like, why can't
I want to fucking meditate too. You go to fucking work today. I'm going to stay home with the kids and meditate or whatever the fuck they want to do.
Right.
I think that's a great conversation to have.
Well, and I think and maybe if according to you, masculinity is in providership, there are non-traditional roles happening all the time where men are staying home and women are the breadwinners, and whatever works for your family.
Yep.
It doesn't mean that you can't be in that role and be a masculine.
Exactly the point.
It's providing a different kind of emotional energy in your home.
That's exactly right.
But it's also maybe about finding balance. I think that
the only conflict in that situation is what society puts on it.
Right.
I mean, fuck society.
Like, whatever you're providing might be in your own family decision.
Right. You're still going to be a man.
Well, so let's go through the most searched topics. So under anxiety and stress relief, one of the main things men are particularly interested in is finding ways to start their day mindfully with multiple searches. And the highest search peak is in the morning, looking for meditation routines to start their day on a mindful path. So can you just quickly give us a little bit of like, do you feel you need to start your day mindfully? How do you start your day? Is this something that you're knowing you need? Mindfulness? Have you always started your day mindfully?
No.
When did you start to?
No, I would say, in fact, I have started most of my days completely mindless and have gone to bed also completely mindless.
Mm-hmm.
Only in the last, several years have I become more mindful. And I don't think that's intrinsically masculine. I actually don't think that is that big of a difference between women and men.
Why do you think men are searching this so much now?
Probably because they feel overwhelmed
The
and then,
stress.
yeah, they feel unloved. And you have this whole segment of the population now that is looking in a certain direction for mindfulness and peace, and men feel left out.
How do you
I
start
think
your
that's actually pretty common. And um, I think it's unfair for women to ask men to be mindful without giving them the space to be mindful. You know what I mean?
do you think women don't give
I
men
think
the space?
some don't. Some don't.
Okay. So listeners, if you're wanting your husband to be more in touch with his emotions, you have to give him space to feel.
Right.
So safety to feel, we know for
And
sure.
also, I mean, saying that, I think men also have to value that.
Well,
you
they
know?
have to ask for it. We're
That's right.
not, we're also not mind readers.
That's right. That's right.
I think a lot of times you guys have a lot of feelings and don't share them, and we feel very
Yeah.
much like, what is he thinking all the time? And then for whatever reason, when
mean,
we ask, we don't get a lot of response, and then it's like
I've honestly
a lot of
I've always
confusion.
felt the same way. I mean, I've felt the same way for a long time.
How do you start your morning mindfully?
For example, Bessie's really most mindful thing she did was yoga. That really, the year she was serious about yoga and she did it 3 to 5 days a week, our relationship was better. She was generally happy. She drank less. Everything was better. And I didn't really appreciate that until she quit. She quit doing yoga the last probably 3 or 4 years of her life, and it was tough. It was really tough. And forever, I turned my nose. I was like, I used to make fun of her. Yoga's not working out. You're wasting your time. Um, I wasn't very nice about it.
Why? Because were you upset that she left and did that for herself?
Actually, I think I was kind of jealous.
Why were you jealous? Because you didn't have a mindful thing?
Right, right. But that was kind of by choice for me. I
Right.
mean, I didn't.
But that was just in a time when you were already so resentful?
Um, yeah, but I would have loved for somebody to tell me, hey, this anger that you're feeling, there's some things you can do to help release that and to treat that.
Do you think that masculinity means solving your own problems without asking for help?
For 100%. And I think there's a lot of, I accepted my unhappy fate a little bit more than maybe I should have.
Do you think that men need to ask for help if they want to feel more?
I mean, you gotta be really careful. You gotta be careful who you ask, when you ask, how you ask.
So it's just fear of unlovable?
Hmm.
Because you think if you ask for help and show that you don't know everything.
Yeah, so I think that's one of the, or at least hopefully this is changing, but I think one of the difference between men and women at the workplace is with that kind of toxic male dominance in the workplace, the woman may feel like she didn't have a choice, right? The man actually does have a choice. And unfortunately, the choice is get on board with male dominant toxic masculinity or you're out. And so that
Mhm.
they get on board. But my point is that I didn't really feel like I had a choice. Like I had to be this way to be able to answer that base question.
Mm.
And then once you decide that's the way you have to be, you run with it.
How would a wife untangle that?
I don't know. um, I
How
think
could she have untangled that for you? Your belief system that wasn't real,
um,
but based on assumptions and stories and fears.
just like everybody else, she would have had to work through some of her own issues, which we didn't do.
Awareness and communication is what you're trying to say, I think,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly.
So again,
For example, like the difference, like today.
when you said work on her own issues, sorry, let me just clarify that. You meant like loving herself enough to
Yeah.
know what she needed to then be able to
Yeah.
verbalize it.
Right.
Okay, so again, this is like literally what I'm trying to verbalize through the brand building group and creating like a more niche in our brand is exactly that. It's like it's complicated with emotions because there's so many layers to it. But it's like, what is the problem? The problem is that we don't love ourselves. We're afraid or we're unlovable is really what the problem is.
Yeah.
And then we hide and change and keep it all tucked up and like
Right.
present an image that we think the person, friend, worker, coworker, whatever
Right.
needs in order to be whatever the image is that we're trying to project. And like in that, we've lost ourselves. We're unhappy. We have this huge gap of like of unhappiness, fear, resentment, all these emotions that are not positive.
Yeah.
And then we stay there.
Yeah.
And then women are like, why can't I connect to my husband? Why can't I? Or in women in the workplace, like, why can't I get what I want? Why are these men so stoic? And men are like, well, I can never say my fears.
that issue, and on the extreme, which we all love watching crime shows, on the extreme is sociopathy and psychopathy and murder, frankly.
Okay, so again, I'm going to lead back to this. It's so interesting because I think that the cure all to everything is, I want to say self-love is the cure, but the tool to get self-love is awareness.
Yeah.
You have to love yourself enough to take the time, is what you're saying,
Yep.
to be mindful in the morning and start your day with a little bit of whatever Zen it is that you're needing to accomplish,
Mhm.
which is what we're trying to do in this company, is give people tools.
Mhm.
And then you have to actually be embodied, so be in your body, not so much your brain, because that's a trickery. It can
Mhm.
lie to you. So what you're saying is all brain.
Mhm.
Brain survival skills. It's like, oh, you're not enough, David.
Well, when you asked me like what could she have done, and one of the things that she could have done, what she didn't have the skills to do, is to look at my body and think about what was going on in my body.
Just like how afraid you were,
Yeah.
because when you're afraid, what does your body look like?
I get all like almost like a turtle. Like
Contracted.
Yeah.
They call that contraction.
Yeah.
And so it's actually interesting in the somatic field. It's so cool. Like the body, look, both just like the anatomy and physiology of our body is in frequent patterns of contraction and expansion, right?
Yeah.
The heart contracts and expands.
Yeah.
Blood vessels contract, muscles contract and expand, right?
Yeah.
So there's these lengthening and contracting periods, and it's very physiologically based that our emotions make our body go into, protection is a contraction. So afraid, protection. I don't feel like I connect. I'm not safe here to be in this communal space. I don't want to be seen. Get away from me.
Mhm.
Like, go away. I'm hiding. Boom. We're like closing in. That's shoulders up to ears, blocking your chest, which is like kind of a vulnerable space, right? Your stomach hurts.
And that kind of reverberates through like your behavior as well. I could see that in my social interactions as well.
Lack of eye contact.
Yeah, I didn't want to go to Mardi Gras balls. I didn't want to, interact with a bunch of people.
Didn't want to be seen.
Didn't want to be seen, and I was.
But the truth is that your deepest desire
is
the opposite of that.
Right.
You felt like you were never seen.
Right.
So when you are seen, what does your body look and feel like? What are if someone was to look at their spouse and say like, he feels safe, he feels connected, he feels totally in peace and seen here. Seen. I'm going to say seen because that's for you. You'll be able to work through that in your body.
Like, how would you know that's happening?
Yeah. Like, what could I see in your
you
body?
Feel at ease.
Mm-hmm. So your shoulders are relaxed.
Yeah.
Your chest is almost open.
Everything kind of relaxes.
Your eyes are making full contact with the person in front of you. So you're looking in their eyes.
Or like
and not
smiling with your teeth.
Yeah, smiling.
Or smiling when something is, you don't have to be elated to smile. You can just be pleased and smile. I used to never do that. Like, pleased to look for me was like this.
I always laugh and say you have a resting bitch face.
Yeah. I smile. In fact, when I was watching our
eyes.
Our wedding video the other day, I was smiling the entire time.
Right.
And
because you felt connected.
Yeah, that's a really new behavior for me, is smiling. In fact, people used to make fun of me because for pictures I never smile. Well, as you know, my initial pictures that she saw before we met.
You look like a serial killer.
Yeah. I thought smiling was a sign of weakness. And
naturally, when you're dating someone, you Google search them, and all his Google photos were like him literally looking like it was a mugshot. Yeah. I was like, resting bee face. Okay, so again, do you have a morning routine that you want to share that is a mindfulness practice of yours? When you're on your A game, you do Pilates.
Yep. I do like exercising first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a big difference to the entire day, if not the whole week.
Mindfulness exercise, you feel does what for you?
Actually, I think what it does is kind of takes your body out of the equation a little bit. It kind of exhausts your body, which is great, and just lets you kind of be a little bit more.
So I think it's the opposite. I think it exhausts Pilates, I think actually exhausts your body, of course, but exhausts your mind.
It does exhaust your mind too.
It's like your mind has to focus so hard.
It's exhausting in general.
You're just in your body.
Yeah.
We can't really be in your thoughts.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Sex too.
Mm-hmm.
I like sex in the morning.
All men. We laugh. Yeah. We have a really funny gay friend who always yells at me. I'm like, why is it always in the morning? It's like
Yeah.
women are so
And he was
have
like,
so much shit
"Get
to do.
over it. Get
He's
over it."
like, get over it. It's
Right.
what because you get in a morning erection. It's just let's time to go.
Yeah, and you're ready to go in the morning.
That is a masculine thought, right?
Yeah.
It's working for me. I don't understand. It's
Right.
very logical. Here it is. Like
Right.
okay,
What else in the morning? Other than the morning drive, which
making your
can,
coffee probably, huh?
yeah, I'd say probably the most thoughtful, mindful thing I do is I listen to the music that I want on the way to work.
Mhm.
So I pick music based on my mood or feeling, and I just kind of go with the music
And
feeling.
let the emotions come.
Yeah.
Music is a beautiful
So
way.
I cry a lot of times on the way to work. I just kind of let the emotions come in and
That's actually a wonderful thing to tell men. So, like, if you're new to feeling and you're wanting to work on being more in touch with yourself, like you actually have to practice feeling like a muscle.
yeah,
It's you got to flex the muscle,
yeah,
because innately, if you're shoving it down and pushing it away and compartmentalizing, and that's your survival skill that's worked for you for a long time, or that's what you think the world expects of you to be lovable, you're going to have a hard time connecting with your emotions
yeah,
because you've lost the embodiment of emotions in general. You just stopped connecting your body and your brain to your feelings, and so maybe try creating different emotional playlists depending on your mood, and
yeah,
then allowing whatever emotions to come up and don't try to suppress them, or notice what happens in your body when you want to push things away and
yeah,
just allow them to be, knowing that it's fleeting. Nothing lasts forever. A big fear of most people is that if they allow themselves, I have a coaching client who said this, I feel like I'm always emotionally walking a tightrope in life, and if I allow myself to feel, she had been through a lot, she allowed herself to feel all the feelings, that she was going to fall off the rope and just
yeah.
not be able to take care of her
I
family.
have
I
felt
think
that
men feel like that.
for sure. Have felt that. In fact, that was my entire motivation to get therapy to begin with.
Hmm.
That was because I had a deep feel, which is interesting. Going back to the masculine thing of feeling like you need to provide.
Yeah.
I had reached the point emotionally after she died that I could not. I was unable to provide, which is just a shot in the core to a man.
Mm.
To me, I felt I already felt like the foundation of my life had kind of crumbled, but I was kind of holding on to, hey, this is my job. This is what I got to do. I got to provide for these kids. That's what I thought. I thought that would be like a pillar in the storm, and I would just hold on to that, and that would define who I was. And I reached the point emotionally where I did not. I started to really question that I was going to be able to do that or not. And that's when I kind
So
of
when your masculinity is in
pulled back out.
question, or the basic things that make you who you are
Yeah,
as a man, that's a good time to seek out help.
for sure.
That's a number two most searched thing is mental health. Men are really starting to look up topics like depression, therapy, counseling. They're increasingly looking for ways to improve their mental well-being.
Yeah,
Growing in awareness and acceptance and seeking help for men is really becoming a hot topic, which is really, really helpful because I actually think the biggest relationship fixer, and way that we communicate with our partners is to go to therapy. Women are constantly saying, like, well, what if my husband won't go to therapy? I find that to be a big red flag.
hmm
Uh, there's no good way to say that. And I'm sorry, ladies. I know I've actually, I think, severed a few friendships by sort of subtly saying this. And
hmm
it's the truth is that if your spouse isn't willing to do emotional work with you, I am going to say that they're maybe not going to be able to meet you where you need to be met.
yeah. It's not even
But I also think you have to say that if you cannot meet me where I need to be met, I'm not sure I can move forward in this relationship.
right.
And that's not a threat. I mean, can you actually be in a relationship and not meet each other somewhere emotionally
Right.
that needs to be met?
And I think it's not necessarily anybody's fault
No,
because
I mean, it's deeply fearful to go to
if you
therapy.
enter into a relationship like a lot of people do without ever talking about your plans, your needs, your wants, all that stuff, then you're gonna end up needing that later, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think it's unfortunate that some men and women see that when they reach that point as kind of, if we don't do this, our relationship's over. Well, you should have done it before the relationship started, right?
All
Nobody,
these, yeah, and all these topics about going to therapy are really the next search topic. So
yeah.
we had holistic health was one of the next ones,
And
which was
I want to say therapy in and of itself is not necessarily the answer, but just saying, hey, I need something, and then having your partner say, what do you need? How can we satisfy the need? That's the biggest step. That could be, um,
Well,
I don't need a therapy. We need to go on a walk every day for
right, we
30
need to
minutes. Right.
connect.
Right. That's,
How do we safely
but
connect
basically,
together?
if a person in the equation says, "Hey, I think we need therapy," and the other one says, "Fuck you," I don't know where you go with that.
Yeah, I think, and remember, therapy isn't going to fix everything. The
No.
internal work, the self-love is what actually fixes
Right.
most of the problems. The therapist is there to hold a safe space
Right.
for you to bring your emotions and practice
Right.
saying how you feel, and then with that neutrality of the person, you're going to be guided through, and there are levels of therapy. There's like excellent therapy, and then there's sometimes just people who want to just hear, and even that practice of saying how you feel builds your muscle. It flexes
And
the
just
awareness
and
muscle.
just having your spouse say yes. I
I
hear
choose you.
right.
I choose you.
Hey, you may think therapy's bullshit,
I
but
choose hard work for you.
right, but just saying yes, I'm willing to try something that maybe would help fill your need.
Right.
That's a huge. I mean, it's the equivalent of like if your car could talk and it asks you for gas, and you're like, "No, fuck you, I'm not getting any gas for you."
Exactly.
It's not going to work.
If you want to do something, just like any other, it's a habit. You have to create
Mhm.
consistency, and you have to practice, right? Feelings aren't just going to come naturally, and they're very hard and very scary. We're asking you to do vulnerable things. And so self-love has been something I've been working on, oh my God, over a decade, right? Like how to overcome fear by loving myself enough not to set a boundary to say, screw you. It's to say, I deserve better. I deserve more.
Yeah, I think
And men need to speak up more.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Both sides need to tell each other
Women too.
what they
Yes,
need.
of course.
Right.
I think women are actually exhausted because
I totally agree.
in femininity, we're doing both. Like, the boss babe, the reason I'm like a little bit over it is because it's like
Right.
now we're doing all the men roles and all the female roles. And
Right.
I can't tell you, that is exhausting. I cannot do all of those roles and show up emotionally for my partner. And at the end of the day, be like, what can I do for you now? Like,
Yeah,
there's
and
nothing left in the tank
I think
by the
it's
time you.
really sad when couples just accept disconnection as the reality of a
I think
relationship.
if we created this entire company Wake to talk about that, like sleepwalking, my heartbeat for why we're doing this. Why do I get up 6 months pregnant, record this every week with or without paychecks? Why do I build an app? Why do I do what I do? Why do you show up? I mean, you're a surgeon. Like, this is really hard for you to come. You have a very busy practice. We have 5 children who we love. We're doing this because we lost everything, and we realized that our biggest regret was the ways that we were sleepwalking, the ways we were disconnected, the ways we didn't live by not being our authentic self. We let fear of not being lovable stop us from being loved, and that's the problem. That's where fear blocks you from loneliness and self-love. Self-love and awareness allow you to have the things that you're desiring deep inside. And the way that you get there is by just taking some time to pay attention to yourself and then say what you need, which is not easy.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me why I do this, I do it because
Excuse
I think it's really important, and I really wish I would have had this.
Well, I feel like we
25
do
years ago,
this,
30 years
a lot of times we talk about the problems in our marriage, which some of you people out there listening may, especially if you knew our spouses who are amazing, amazing people, might think that we are doing that out of like not love. That's actually the opposite. We are doing this out of the deepest love and respect for our spouses who didn't get the opportunity to do this work.
Yeah.
And that only in the massive amount of shattering and loss did fear succumb us. Like, we were succumb with, there was nothing but fear that we wouldn't live if we didn't stand up for ourselves, say what we needed. We weren't going to get out of bed. We weren't going to provide for our families. We were going to kill ourselves. That's what widows feel like when they lose everything. And you still have children to parent, bills to pay. The world spins. No one cares. I mean, they care, but they don't care enough to give you space and pay your bills for you. People, God will provide. Well, yes, maybe, God will help you, guide you to get yourself back on your own feet, but they don't fly down, do your dishes, take care of your grieving families and pay all your bills, your mortgage. None of that happens. You have to, with deep fear and inability to hide anymore. You're too tired. You lost your coping strategies. You lost your fake it ability. And that is what we're here to teach you is don't wait until you die, until you get a diagnosis, until your life falls apart, until there's a divorce in hand. Don't let yourself stay in situations where you're not allowed to be a healthy masculine person or a healthy feminine person and say what you need.
Well, I think that's a key is that, and this is where my disconnect from before was that saying what you need is a constructive thing, not a destructive thing. That I thought forever that if I said what I needed, that it would destroy what I had. And I think we have to flip that on its head. That actually saying what you need,
it actually might destroy. Let's be clear. Saying what you need might actually destroy your relationship. And if it does destroy your relationship, I want you to ask this question. Was this an authentic relationship in the first place? Doesn't mean it didn't have love in it. It doesn't mean you regret, if it's someone you've had children with that you've built an entire life with. Did you build an entire life in honesty, or did you build an entire life in the facade of the person you thought you needed to be in order to be loved? And are you showing up in your partnerships being who you actually are beneath it all? Because if a tragedy happens in your world, what we're trying to tell you is you will not be able to hide anymore. You will have to be your real self in order to heal, in order to function.
Well,
right?
Yeah, or risk serious
Or you're going to die.
Right.
The death of your life will go away. You will not be able to function for your loved ones or yourself.
Which I think does happen.
Yeah, I do too. Okay, so sorry, I got very impassioned on that, but I think it's super important that we're understanding, and this has a lot to do with masculinity and the changes there. I think when people are asking questions to men, I think a lot of it is providership and strength and stability all create this facade of needing to hide even more than women.
Yeah.
I think women, we need to embrace our emotionality a little bit more in the sense that it's annoying because we've been shamed for being so emotional for so long. And that's why we're not advancing in the career. And that's why. And I'm like, bullshit. It's bullshit and a half. And in fact, actually, we should embrace our emotionality. We should embrace our menstruation. We should embrace the hormonal waves that we actually ride. And as a pregnant person, I can tell you progesterone and estrogen are spiking. And I am so emotional. And when they drop, when you deliver a baby within like a 48-hour period, you have the largest drop in estrogen and progesterone like in your entire life cycle. It's like a dangerous drop. Well, we wonder why we get postpartum depression. Our body is making these circadian and these rhythms of emotionality, and it's okay. Let's ride the wave. Let's just be honest about where we are instead of hiding everything.
And actually, interestingly, if you're talking about hormones, men do not have that at all.
No, you have a lot of testosterone, which is
so men's testosterone basically spikes, preteen, teen, and it starts a very slow decline down. It's very, very constant.
Right.
Excepting pathology. But I mean the normal male.
And maybe that's the thing. Maybe the design of the masculine versus the feminine is to be balanced. Like we have one more person that's a little more steady.
Hormonally, for sure.
Hormonally.
There's no question about it.
So that they can provide. I'm not saying emotionality means you can't provide. I mean, come on, that's ridiculous. But maybe it does make us.
I think that's the beauty of the modern world is that it's okay.
Right. But let's get back to a few more questions. There's some really good ones on this list.
Are we done with questions yet?
We're almost done. We did a lot. So what does it mean to be masculine to you? We talked about. I think this is natural. We already just said this. Do you think men hate feeling? You said yes, right?
Fuck yeah, it's scary as shit.
Why is it so scary for
y'all?
Does the masculine energy naturally, like strength, providership, stability, go away with feelings? And who put this in your brains?
Yeah, because you feel vulnerable and at risk.
And when we're vulnerable, we think we can't provide.
Right.
Or be stable.
Right.
It's a real feeling, though.
Right.
Women feel that too, actually.
Yeah.
I feel more unloved when I feel like very vulnerable, but
I think that it's scary.
It is scary.
That goes back to the safe place. I mean, as long as you're in a safe place.
Can you assure people of how that's not necessarily true if you have the right?
Yeah, but you have to, when you assure people, you also have to understand that when they're in it, it's hard to see out of it.
Yeah.
Like when you're really in an emotional state, it can be very difficult to understand that tomorrow you're going to wake up and it's going to be different. You're going to be alive and it's going to be okay.
Okay. There's a really good question that's like could be an entire podcast that came in, which is we kind of talked about this, but it's like this is for my women out there. And this question is amazing. It's talking about the feelings we feel versus the feelings you choose to express as a man. Why why is there such a gap? How do you choose when to feel and express feelings, excuse me, versus not? Why do we withhold
Yeah.
in certain spaces? And, a lot of times I've noticed anger for us, like recently we've had a lot of things going on.
That's a
in our
very
house.
complicated question.
Yeah, it's a
I
super
think has
complicated
multiple answers and really depends on the person and the situation.
Well, just answer for you because that's all you really can. And remember, emotionality changes from person to person, is what he's saying. So
I can answer for me for sure, and I still struggle with this, even though I feel very safe telling you how I feel. My people pleasing really goes into overdrive when I really start feeling particularly negative emotions, but really any emotions. I don't want because when you're feeling emotional or having an issue, I have sympathetic emotional feelings. You know what I mean? Like I'm also caught up in your feeling of whatever, not enoughness or
because you want to fix it,
no, because we're kind of connected and
but you do want to fix it.
yeah. And well, even if you
Because I
can't,
think that's a common male thing.
even if you can't fix it, you don't want to contribute negatively to it. And sometimes saying what you're feeling at that time, at least internally, feels like I'm going to make this worse. If I try to, tell her really how I'm feeling.
So that's when you choose to not withhold.
Yeah.
So when we're in an emotional crisis,
Yeah.
instead of getting on board and saying how you feel too,
Right.
you don't want to.
It
feels unstable.
Yeah.
You're going to make more instability.
Right.
And
you feel almost a voice inside of you saying that my job in this situation is to be stable, clear, logical, reassurant. Yeah, which I do. I do that.
Yeah,
and I actually think it helps. Honestly,
I do think that there is a really lovely thing about saying, like, a hug and being like,
it's gonna be okay.
Everything's gonna be okay.
It's
And you're like, that's such bullshit, most likely, but it is really nice to hear.
And you do the same thing.
And I actually think the better phrase for men to say, if you're fearful to connect in a time where things are extremely heightened emotions in your partnerships, is maybe to just say, I'm here for you.
Or to actually, honestly, to say nothing, which is really hard, and just touch or hug or a foot.
I am learning that with Dion, who's expert in somatic.
Yeah, you cannot underestimate the power of physical connection in emotionally trying.
One of the things that she guided us through this week is David has been having fear-based anger reactions all week. So we're dealing with a situation. His initial instinct is fiery anger. The reality behind that anger is he's sad and afraid. And when he gets angry, it triggers me because most of the men in my life have met me with anger that almost is this, like, and women maybe can relate, condescending anger, as though, why would you do that? You don't, like, I don't trust you. You don't know what you're doing, is the message that I receive in that. Which is probably my own message from, growing up in a home of a narcissist for a father. And
I do think there is a little bit
with a developing narcissist.
There is a little bit of it's not exactly what it is. I mean, you're close. I think that there is more. I'm having an emotional thing. I'm angry. Get out of my way, which is a very masculine like thing. I am having an emotional moment. Get out of my way. That's a internal feeling that I sometimes have.
I've never heard you say that. Well, so
don't get in my way right now, because right now I am letting my masculine need to control, provide, fix,
And stabilize.
and stabilize. I'm letting that fucking rip because I need to stabilize quick because I feel unsafe.
Well, that's
'Cause I'm
probably
scared.
worth like thousands of dollars of therapy right there. I've never heard anyone say that. That makes sense to me, oddly enough. Annoyingly enough, you want that not to be what you're thinking. But because in that time, like women are very opposite. We want
Right.
you to hold our hand and maybe cry with us, which is just not how you're going to handle that. So it's like, yeah, something really scary, like one of your kids is going to be hurt, or you've lost a, I don't know, a pet, or, you know, there's like, I can just think of so many people who respond with anger in a really scary situation where you're like, I needed a hug, or
Right.
to say, hey, like, thank you for taking care of that thing. And in response for it, David was like, you know, pure anger. And then I was like, what the F?
Right.
Now you're also getting mad at me on top of this terrible thing that we're walking through together. And what Dion had said was a recommendation for me as a female to support him in his masculine bomb of like emotion that was really, once he calmed down, he was also afraid. And it took him a minute. So he had to go through the anger, try to like do some toxic masculine thing to like solve the problem, which was like not even the problem that was happening.
It can
but
be
like,
very misguided and
very misguided.
for sure.
But either way, it makes sense that you were like, you were threatened and you thought our family was threatened in this scenario. And then you wanted to fix the problem right away. You didn't want me to keep going down what you thought was problematic way.
Right.
Which was not. Anyway, in that she said, instead of talking, right? Because that's my love language. Or my way of handling things is just to like talk through it. That's not effective for him. Is just to reach out and really like touch his arm and be like, can you please, like, I need you to get like ease down on the anger so that we can actually communicate here.
Or just, hey, I want to make you aware that your tone of voice is,
it's kind of upsetting me.
It's loud. It's upsetting.
Yeah, it's upsetting me. Right. And I did that, and it did work.
It does work. Yeah.
It works because it brings him back into the present.
Yeah.
So you can see this is where we're talking about embodiment practices and somatic work, which is like, this is the toolkit that we use to help people bring awareness and build self-love and heal from loss.
Yeah. And honestly, if you do it without the touch, it can be interpreted as confrontational.
Right.
You know? And
so
that just kind of adds to
when I touched you, it took you out of your brain, the fears, the non-real thoughts that you had to fix something. We were getting unstable. And even if we were actually physically getting, we were getting unstable. Most of our problems in relationships are not in our control.
No.
We have to get on board and create a plan together. So the touch brought him right back into the now.
Yeah. Well, I think that
and brought him into awareness.
The togetherness is important for me because I have felt alone a lot in my life. And I have felt that whatever problems I have, I had to solve myself. I can't.
Yeah, I felt that too.
And knowing that someone is there with you, not to be a part of the problem, but to help be a part of the solution is a huge, huge help. It's just hugely helpful, even if my initial reaction to that may be still, no, get the fuck out of my way. I'm going to fix this, then I'll come back.
Yeah.
But to know that I don't have to fix it, number one, I don't have to fix it. Number two, that I don't have to fix it myself if it does require fixing. Because our minds together are definitely better than our minds apart.
Well, and maybe, like, I feel like Dion, if she was here, would say, she said a lot that my role as a woman to support David is to, it's a lot, ladies, what I'm about to say. And she means it in that she's like so studied and intelligent and like this, I'm going to botch this probably. And she's way more intelligent than I could be on this whole topic, but she's looking at the archetype of masculinity and femininity. And so she was saying like the king energy, like, and the queen energy of our home is something we need to consider, which is like, you need to allow your man to be a man. We need to allow our women to be a queen. So like the queen, actually, if you think about it, it's kind of the badass. Like she's definitely upholding the man.
Yep.
She knows she's got her people. She knows it is known that she is going to say what she needs and what she's going to get what she wants. Like the queen has a confidence and a stability in herself to know how to run the entire organization. But the
Yeah.
king is technically like guiding the ship.
Yeah.
I don't believe necessarily in like an actual life like that, but she's saying to let David be a man.
Yeah, this is for
So
me
let him take care of
not
things.
to bring politics into this.
No, I know. This
But
gets a little tricky.
This is a very libertarian approach. This is basically for me what libertarianism is.
And
It
you
is-
are a libertarian.
I am. It is an acceptance of humanity as it is, right? So instead of trying to change your basic drives or your core who you are, we're going to accept who you are. And then we're going to say, okay, your innate drive to provide, your masculine innate drive to provide, that's cool.
It's not necessarily toxic.
Exactly.
It only becomes toxic when you lose
And
freedom.
here's the boundary. The boundary is there's no male dominance. We're going to do this together. You're going to provide sometimes. I'm going to provide sometimes. You're going to mother sometimes. I'm going to mother sometimes. And maybe you feel like your primary role is providing, but you're not You're not in a dominant situation.
You don't dominate another.
That's what
human.
libertarian is, right? Libertarian is, hey, you be who you are. Be your true self, right up to the point where you interact with somebody else's true self.
Mhm.
And if your true self has to push that true self, other person's true self down, that's the limit. And for me, for masculinity, that's kind of works best.
And that's
Because
what she's
otherwise you're
saying.
just in denial of, if you come to me and tell me, well, that's bullshit, the man shouldn't provide, and that's fine. And maybe you can think yourself out of it. Or you can just accept the fact that we have these feelings,
Right, your worthiness is wrapped up in that providership role, and that doesn't mean that you have to. The woman can't make more money than you or any of that. It just means if you are in a non, I don't even know if it's non-traditional anymore. Like if you're in a relationship where you're working from the home as a man, and then maybe your wife was making more money than you, then what are the ways that you are providing? I guess that would be like, what ways do you?
All kinds of other ways.
There's tons of ways.
Right.
Well, are there? I guess the last question maybe I might have for you is: have there been scenarios in your life that you've had to suppress your masculinity?
No, not really.
I'm like, is that just a?
I can't think of any. Unless you say that being masculine is not feeling, and of course I did that for a long time. Where I had to suppress my masculinity, not that I can think of.
Because masculinity is feeling.
Yeah.
But maybe masculinity, what you're saying, is got sort of a screen around your emotions that if it threatens, if giving your emotions out threatens providership stability and strength, or perceived
protecting too. That's
protection.
I forgot about that one.
Strength.
From I never forget. Your daughter told me that once when it was so cute. I used to be, and I'm better about it now, but I used to be really compulsive, almost OCD level about locking the doors and
shutting down the house. We'll call it.
Yeah, I used to call it putting the house to sleep, but really it was securing the house. Right, it's really what I was doing. I was securing the house to protect the family, and I would often say that's why I was doing it. And same thing with like firearms. I always had a lot of firearms around because I had this idea that I needed to protect my family from some unknown threat. Retrospectively, that was my fear and
anxiety.
But I was locking the doors and she was making fun of me, like, why are you locking the doors? And little Kate at the time probably was like 9 or 8. And she was like,
maybe younger, 7.
She's like, that's what David does. He's here to protect us. I remember thinking, yeah, that I do feel the drive to protect the family physically and in every way, really. And that comes back to the king thing. I mean, there's a castle feeling, like you feel like your home could be a trailer, or it could be a mansion. The man feels like the home needs to be safe and secure place for his family to live.
And do you think the protection and safety and providership in that way is something that is, have you been taught that?
No, that's an interesting.
Well, because what about toxic male roles.
Like overly protective.
Also abusive and
Right.
jealousy, and
Yeah.
when things have gotten off hand.
And I
You think the
that
toxicity is what's taught? Like, was that the learned response of an unhealthy male dominance in a home? So
to protect the home.
abusive fathers, jealous husbands who
Yeah.
abusive
They'll use that as an
spouses.
excuse, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm asking, like, do you think that those things were learned by their fathers so that they?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. That's been shown. 100%. Men that come from abusive families are way more likely to be abusive.
Oh, I know that. I'm just saying. So, but you think providership and securing and keeping your home safe, that's different. That
Yeah,
defines masculinity, and that's not toxic
that's not
because it's
intrinsically bad, but it can become toxic, right? So if you took that to the extreme of you're my wife, you don't leave the house, right? You can't leave the secure place that I've provided for you ever.
well, this is so many topics right now, which I think is awesome about awareness. Is like we're building awareness towards everything from like diversity to like if you pretend like it's like when people are like, oh, let's teach our children that there's no everyone's the same
Right.
color. You're
Right.
like, or let's I even think like let's suppress history, like let's not tell the truth of like how this terrible shit has happened in the past.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, okay, well, that's not very honest, and like that's not the fucking truth. Like you're actually
Yeah.
just putting a blanket over stuff. It's like same with toxicity in both feminine and
I
masculine, but
agree. You can, and they unfortunately, our central planners routinely throw the baby out with the bathwater. Routinely.
right.
I think about this story when my daughter was in probably fourth grade, third or fourth grade. They had this whole Friday dedicated to violence. That was the talk. It was about violence, and they spent the whole day talking about it. And one of the things, like Kate brought home her little flyers, looking through it, and one of the tenets, like the very first point, first bullet point, was that violence should never. It said never ever be used to solve problems. And I was like, okay, I mean that I get where that comes from, right? Violence sucks. It's scary and it sucks. And I asked Kate about it. I was like, Kate, what do you think about this?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I don't know, Dad. What if somebody's really trying to hurt me? I was like, yeah, I mean, you can't tell kids to never use violence, right?
Absolutes are really a bad idea
Really
in
bad
life.
idea. But the point is, they took like a decent idea and threw the whole thing out without thinking. Wait a minute, there are bad people out there, and sometimes you have to defend yourself.
Well, and I think that's the thing about the movement towards suppressing the masculinity, or like there's
Right.
a lot of wave right now of like
Right.
anger towards the men, and there's this I mean, I can understand it because
So
it's exhausting to
I think
have
that's
to
a perfect example of the difference between toxicity and just
well,
masculinity.
just we need to be careful, right? Women, when we're furious at the patriarchy, yeah, well, we can dismantle the system
Right.
best we know how to do it, but we also need to be careful that we're not trying to rid of all masculinity.
Right.
Like
Right.
it's not all toxic. It's just there is a lot of toxicity, and there's a lot of history of toxicity
Right.
and systems that we're responsible of. Again, what can we control?
Well,
And
that's the
sometimes
thing. I don't think the limits are that difficult. I'm not
well,
sure. I'm not sure why we do
it's freaking overwhelming when you get into
Right.
news spaces and you get into
Right.
like restructuring systems, like deeply toxic
that. Right.
patriarchal systems. To think about how to dismantle that, well, I think it begins with ourself, and it begins with self-love, and it
Yeah.
begins with knowing what we
I
need and
actually
when
think
we
it
not feel
begins and ends with
totally,
that. That's
because all you really can, I mean, you can make a difference, but you can
Right.
make a difference in your own circle, in your own world, with your own children,
Yeah.
with yourself, and say like, okay, I'm in this patriarchal system
Yeah.
at work, and I am going to say, nope, I'm not doing that.
Right.
Like this isn't serving me, and it's not serving the company, and it's not
And I
serving.
actually think that's happened a lot.
It is. That's
I
where
think
Me Too got its legs. You
right. I
know.
think like Kate in engineering. I mean, female engineers have
Yeah.
said, no, we're not doing this anymore. I'm going to start my own women-based engineering program right here
Right. Exactly.
and compete. And that's the answer. And then that other company goes, shit, these women are adding something to the engineering equation that we didn't even know existed before, which is fucking wonderful. I mean, we had the same thing happen in medicine, actually. I mean,
A lot of women in medicine now
very, very,
dominated by women now.
very, very male dominated forever, really. And now there's a lot of women in medicine, and there's positives and negatives to it. If you can think about negatives, but the truth is they've added a lot. I mean, a lot to the medical equation, and it's been overall a huge positive to have women as providers, as physicians, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
we need more emotionality at the bedside for sure. And
yeah, I
not saying
mean,
that men can't be,
they
but
actually have a lot to offer and for caregiving.
so okay. I think that this is a really good kickoff. We are doing a lot of cool things this month in men. Next week coming up, we'll be talking about fathers, father figures, father wounds. There's all kinds of things going on next week with that. So next week's gonna get a little heavier. I think this is a good way to like introduce thoughts on masculinity, at least from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's
and
cool to ask
will
men like
allow
what
me
they
to
think
kind of work it out, which is great. I think that making me think about it is going to be a positive for me.
for sure.
Um,
And we're raising a lot of boys in this house, and
we are, and this comes up all the time.
it does
Like,
come up all the time. We're trying to like decrease toxic male
yeah, because I think
energy.
particularly teenagers, that obvious boundary between masculinity and toxic masculinity as an adult is very unclear as a teenager, right? I mean,
Hmm.
pretty much all of their behavior in a different. We talked about this before, but a normal 16-year-old's behavior at 35, they go to prison. I mean, honestly, I mean, or at minimum are on a lot
They're
of
on the
medications,
DSM,
right? There, you have a DSM-5 diagnosis.
diagnosed with something.
So that is really tricky, and as a dad, you have to. It's really hard as a dad because you can see as an adult that whole transformation that they can't see,
Yeah.
and you just don't want them to slip into um, being closed off. And
I think fathers now really want their boys to have it better than they had it, which means
yeah,
be more connected to their emotions so that they prevent them from
right,
going into emotionless situations where they're stuck.
right,
It
right.
builds resentment. It builds,
Right.
it just builds destruction in all
Right, and I mean,
boys.
one of my biggest fears for all of our kids, not just the boys, is for them to enter into a relationship without mindfulness.
Yep.
That is one of my biggest hopes, that we have given them at least the basic skills to say what they need and what they want
Mindfulness is
from the
such a
beginning.
big term. It's now, I feel, is getting a little bit watered down and diluted because it's everywhere and everything,
Yes,
technically.
self love probably be a better.
I love saying self love because self love requires inner awareness. It requires you to take a second, be in your body,
Yeah,
feel what you feel inside your body, maybe let go of those crazy voices in your head,
yeah,
which can trick you. And
and it's more internal than
and
external.
when we talked about the body sensations, shoulders up, contracting in,
Mhm.
closing off, not being able to look someone in the eyes, those are your signals to your partners and to your friendships and to actually everyone that someone is scared to connect and they're really feeling a lot of vulnerability and a lack of a safety to emote. And so in that we can add human touch if that's appropriate and
Mhm.
consensual, and we can add maybe, hey, I noticed that you seem a little tense, what can I do to
Yeah, and ironically, this is something I never valued ever. I actually was in total denial that human connection had any value at all,
well, yeah, that
which
makes
is
sense, right?
super
Because if
weird.
you're so afraid to open up that you'll be unloved, then, and yeah, I mean, you were taught that being seen would make you unlovable,
Yeah,
then you do these
and
saboteur things where you actually push everyone out and block
yeah.
every kind of connection
But
because
now
they're
when I meet people that are like that, it's distinctly off-putting. It's so weird. Of course, you don't meet that many because they're not out there meeting, right? I mean, but it still comes up, and when it comes up, it is very off-putting. I just don't understand why you would want to go through life without connecting.
it's because they're dead afraid. But
Yeah,
I would say that again, get into your body first. Try to listen to some music on the way to work to try to practice emoting. Music is such an easy and powerful way to
mhm.
like feel a feeling,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's a good
positive.
way to like embody and just like start the process. And then women, I think we learned a lot today about the better times to allow your husband or partners to be maybe a little bit withheld. And then a ways to engage might be physical contact and slowing things down a little bit after they've raged through and tried to solve the problem, like giving them a little space to get their anger out.
Is that what you learned today?
I mean, I did. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
And that masculinity is not toxicity, and it can be, but that's not an equivalent definition. They do not go symbiotically together. Right. So toxicity is when it's gotten off balance, just like any other problem we've talked about, right? We talk about every emotional thing we discuss here has a spectrum,
extremes, yeah.
Right? And it has a spectrum that can be, I don't want to engage in my masculinity, maybe. And we didn't really discuss that today, but all the way to my masculinity is maybe
running the show
and dominating.
It's the same thing for women, really.
Totally.
I mean, you can let that cycle rule you, or it can be a positive thing.
Right. Well, so stay tuned in. We can't say it enough. If you haven't liked and subscribed, stay tuned, like us, subscribe us so that you can follow us each week. We're going into Man Month.
Okay, so I wasn't excited about Man Month at all.
I know.
But now,
that's funny. I think David gets nervous sometimes to just be the lead. He's actually going to run a whole podcast by himself, and he's, you're feeling a little bit scared about that, huh?
No, actually, I'm feeling better after today. I feel like this is something I can do.
It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing because we actually, like, one of the tenets of the company is we want all people to feel. And I think it's extremely important that we support men in order for us to be more balanced as a company to feel. I think I'd love to have more spaces for men to feel. And what that means is you can't provide female-driven spaces for men to feel. You actually have to learn about masculinity and create masculine positivity and saying, like, actually this adrenaline seeking, providing stability, sometimes angry looking, higher energy is needed for them to feel.
Which is one of the things I like about the Tantra stuff that we've done.
Yeah.
Like it accepts that that the masculine is different than the feminine, right? So like there's we've done some tantric stuff where like I'm holding her, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not holding me. I'm supporting you. And that feels natural to me to support you physically.
Yeah. We're again going to put in the show notes today lots of links to Dion, our shaman. So we do tantric work together,
and saying that there is some equal tantric work.
Tantra is actually about being embodied, and it's about intimate connections without necessarily sexual things. Right. And what we're working on is building intimacy through embodied practices and not necessarily like having to do with sex. I mean, it can lead to sex most of the time.
But the point is that there are some, it just came to me that there are some subtle different roles in that tantric practice.
It celebrates masculinity, positive masculinity and positive femininity. And honestly, the truth is, like, I think that in order for us to be more balanced in this world and in partnerships, we are going to have to embrace the truth of who we are in all capacity. And actually, women, we've had to be suppressed as well in lots of ways. It's like being our true sexual self and being fully female.
And that
we have to fight pretty hard to get that out.
And that leads
I know
to
I do.
A lot of problems.
It does.
A lot of disconnect.
All the suppression is only hurting us, and so self-love is the answer, really. So, like, subscribe, stay with us. We are
just for the record, this is the first one where she's cutting us off, right?
I know. I don't know.
And I'm not.
Yeah. So the masculine dominance is in play.
Everybody,
thank you guys so much.
About themselves.
Like, subscribe, join us, send us your questions for Man Month. We're here all month. We got a round table with lots of different men who are going to be talking about their feelings and all different sorts of things that should be pretty interesting. And we'll talk about fatherly roles in the next episode. And it should be a nice, good month of men. Okay. Thank you.
This has been Wake the F Up podcast, hosted by Alix and David Long. Be sure to check out other episodes where our community of experts share tools and ideas to help you wake to the life inside of you. If you enjoyed this episode of Wake the F Up, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join the Wake community by downloading our app. Just search for The Wake Wellness in the Apple or Android App Store. And follow us on Instagram at The Wake Wellness. Thanks for listening.